Hi everyone, Leon here, and in today's video I'd like to show you how to make a very chaotic arpeggiated sound inside Serum. So this is the sound that we want to aim for at the end of this video. And so what we want to do is create a blank instance of Serum. Now in this we are greeted with a empty saw wave and blank oscillators. We want to use a saw wave and a noise. So the noise that I like to use for this sort of sound is this Arp white, because you can use the pitch to actually almost do a high pass filter. This can be very helpful when you're wanting to create some more analog sounding sounds. So anyway, so I'm just going to disable the noise for now. And one of the biggest parts of the sound is the chaotic pitches that it goes to. So what we want to do is set this to trigger, set this to half notes. And this is where the trick comes from. We go to basic and square, and we actually want to hold down shift and create some random pitches. And what I'm actually doing is I'm trying to aim as close as I can to these lines and divisions between everything. Using shift will mean that your current grid size set here will allow you to set full blocks. Now this will not be doing anything because we haven't actually routed this to anything. So when I've held down shift and added in these small these blocks, because it doesn't quantize exactly to the horizontal grid, but it quantizes to the vertical grid, it means that things aren't exactly in tune when we put it to the coarse. So this means it will sound a little bit more fine-tuned and analog, because with analog synthesis, things are more chaotic and they are not always perfectly in unison or in pitch. So for this sort of sound, we want to route this to the coarse pitch of our oscillator 1 and go over to the matrix section and make sure that this button here selected to the right side, the right arrow. And what that will mean is that it's only going to be pushing to the upper voices, to the upper pitches. Whereas if you have it on both, it will be going positive and negative. And you can see it displayed here. So if we have it set to just forward motion, we can see it's only going from up to there instead of up and down. So anyway, when we've done that, we can give that a little listen. Those are the pitches. So a big part of this sound is this distortion bandpass control. And to start this whole thing out, we want to be able to have a sort of controlled speed envelope. And for that, we can use an LFO. It has a pluck quality to it. So we want to create an almost saw wave looking LFO shape here. The only notable difference though is that I'm not putting this first point straight smack on at 0% up at the very top, because that can cause clicks and it can make things sound very, very quantized. So having it slightly off gives it a little bit of a smoothened quality, and we want a lot of those unique elements within the sound. So again, this is not routed to anything until we put it in through something. So what I'm going to do is select it to click and drag it over the level of oscillator A. And if I bring this down to around like 20% and extend the range of it, we'll get sort of this sort of sound. And you can hear that it's not actually syncing in the same speed as this. And even though it's set to a similar thing, this is set to 16th notes if we look at the divisions. So we bring this up to 16ths. And depending on the actual amplitude of this wave, you get quite a lot of different qualities. So experimentation is key in this. So I actually kind of like it around the middle. And now what we want to do is also introduce a bit of the noise before we go to the filter. So the noise, it's just on off right now. So it's just straight up doing one thing, So we want this to simulate a sort of fuzz that's integrated to the waveform. So using this to the same speed of oscillator A will simulate as if they're all part of one sound. So keep in mind that once we've added these filters and everything, we intend to go through some distortion and through some compression. And so I'm purposely putting things through quite soft right now. When we do compress it, it will bring life to all of this stuff. So if it's too loud to come in from the beginning, then it can create a lot of heat and be a little bit too intense. So a lot of that is fine tuning down the line, but just going to that with a little bit of the preconceived notion of where things may end up is a very good idea. So anyway, this is all pretty good. One little notable thing that I like to add with this sort of sound is a little bit more of rhythmic interest. And this sort of breaks that one sort of integrated sound, but it makes it seem as if there's artifacts to the sound. So what I like to do is go to LFO 3 and add this to level, bring it down tiniest bit, and put this on trigger so that it syncs with every start note and it syncs with your door. If you set it to off, it's basically be constantly starting at a different point. It won't reset. Yeah, so anyway, if we bring this to same sort of shape, you know, maybe a little bit more of attack, we get this sort of sound. And we can make this a bit longer. I like that sort of sound because it gives it a little bit more motion. So now we turn on our filter and select down on MISC, Distortion Comb Filter to Bandpass. And for this, I only have this routed to oscillator A. If we have it routed to noise, then the illusion is sort of shattered with that integrated sound. I mean, it can work, but we want a little bit more high end in this as well. So with this, let's route our LFO 1, which is the main pluck part of the sound, to the comb filter. See, now that I've reduced the signal of oscillator A, the noise is too loud, which I was talking about before. So now we can bring down the volume of the noise oscillator. And now we can bring up the drive. The more you bring it up, the more chaos it introduces. So you want it maybe around 30%. I'll also introduce a fourth envelope to the comb filter itself. I was mentioning before about the off and trigger functions, whereas trigger means that it will start from point A and will carry through and it will always reset, whereas off will start at a certain point. We'll start from the beginning, but it won't re-trigger. It will just continue through. And so if you want some randomized qualities, off on the mode for your LFOs is a really good tool to keep on. So if I have this at a very slow speed, see how I re-trigger a note and it continues, whereas if it's on trigger, it's always re-triggering from the start point. So this introduces some nice detuning qualities, which I like. And the more resonance we add, the more chaos is introduced, which is cool. So one little thing that I was going to add down the line, but this is a good point to remember to do it. I like to add the modulation to things like the cutoff of the filter. And that means when I introduce a mod wheel, you get some variation. That's it for the oscillator side of the synth. If we go through to the FX section, this is a big part of what makes this sound work. Let's select the distortion. We'll just use the default tube. It sounds very good. So this is what can kind of crunch and compress, saturate things together more so. So maybe around 70% with a bit of the routing of the pluck. Add our OTT. So we just click this multi-band function. Make sure our ratio is at limits, so it's limiting, and our release is at maximum. I was mentioning this before about the noise, how it can be very easy to overdo it. It may sound like a perfect balance before you go into the multiband, but the multiband really compresses things together. You know, it's over the top compression. That's what OTT stands for. So it's important to find that balance. So, you know, I'll bring this down now. There you go. So that's the core part of the sound, right? And now what we want to be able to do is create variations through macros and the modulation wheel so that we can have a little bit more versatility with the sound when we're using it in context, you know, in a cue or a piece of music. What I like to do is add some reverb, put it on plate, and put it pre-compression, meaning that the reverb gets compressed when we do use it. Now I will put a macro set to about 30%, and we can just rename that here verb. Make sure our width is quite high. So with these sort of sounds, when using reverb in a sound like this, it's nice to roll off a lot of the low end with the reverb, but it's also nice to not have as much of the hiss from the high end coming through the reverb. Otherwise, like that's sort of a thing that would happen in old school mixdowns in the mixing techniques with analog reverb, cutting off some of the high end. And this is something that I like to do to simulate the sound of analog. So, you know, if we have this about like up here and then we use the modulation wheel. So the last thing to this sound is another variation thing that we like to use. I really like the sound of the comb filter and the reverb filter. They both they have a similar algorithmic quality. We won't put this over the top, but instead we'll use this on 0% wet with a macro set to sort of A/B it. And what this will do when we turn this on, we just find a sweet spot within the sound. For this part of the sound, I kind of want to increase the resonance so that there's a lot more tail. Yeah, and so you can basically have some variation between all of these macros and modulation. One last thing I almost forgot about is I like to do this when I'm designing presets for preset packs and stuff like that. Now, this is technically synced to the BPM that I'm set to right now, which is 120 BPM. Now, if I were to set it to 140 or 174 or something like that, this might be too fast. So I like to, with the preset design, I like to set another macro to the speed of this pitch, just allow it to be slower or faster. By doing so, I actually have to compensate for the increased routing by just bringing this down to 1 bar, and we just go through from 1 bar to half note to quarter note. So this is at 50%, this is the original speed. And there you get some extra pitch change variations. So there you have it. That's the sound. You can play with it more. You can change the oscillators, create some FM, or have some fun with the change your filter types. But this is generally the way I go about creating something that's a little bit more analog and has a little bit more interest and life in it. It's actually quite easy to make something sound quite analog. You have to just take a few extra steps with how you approach compression or certain filter types or noise and variations in speed or pitch. That's a really good technique in order to simulate analog. But yeah, so this preset will be for free in the description. And I hope this was educational and you learned something. So thank you very much everyone for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.